I first found out about the clinic in 2008 from a friend of ours whose mother who had been challenged by lung cancer and was being treated by Dr. Rau here at the Paracelsus clinic. Successfully, she came to the clinic with stage 4 lung cancer, and typically that's a death sentence in the US with the various treatments that exist, and he ended up keeping her in good health for 11 years before she ultimately passed away. But Dr. Rau came to the United States. That family in particular hosted an event, like a book signing, where he spoke, and people had an opportunity to get a sense as to who he was and how he felt and what the clinic did and so on and so forth. So I met him then. That was in, I think, late 2008, early 2009. And at that time we were dealing with an unfolding crisis with my daughter's health. And we weren't ready at that point because we were going down a discrete path that took time for results, supposedly. Ultimately, which those results never came. At least the positive results never came. The results actually got worse. And after a couple of more failed attempts through different channels, we decided that we would come here. But prior to that, I did additional research and tried to find patients who had come here with very similar conditions to my daughter's condition. And in particular, I found one family who I connected with, the father, who described the symptoms that his daughter was dealing with, which were identical. And on her first visit, which was a 5-week visit, she was in an extremely bad condition. His daughter went from having 10% or 15% functionality in terms of her daily living to 85, 90%. So that was incredibly encouraging to me. I mean, on the one hand, to have the introduction through a cancer patient was interesting and powerful, but to have someone with the same condition on the surface that my daughter had was hugely encouraging and specifically relevant. So I contacted the clinic and found out that Dr. Rau was in fact coming again to the US, and it was an opportunity for my daughter. We live in New York, to go to Boston and meet with him briefly, and through that interaction, hopefully together with my daughter's consent and interest, make a decision to come here. So we met with Dr. Rau in Boston. We had a very powerful meeting with him. He observed her condition, gave her tremendous confidence that he could cure her and give her life back. And with that and my daughter's willingness and interest to do it, we came in 2010.
And what was the result?
So the result from that first trip was life-changing. Her condition at that time was like a multifactorial system breakdown, where all of her systems, her digestive system, her immune system, her adrenal system, her female hormonal system, among others, were all failing at the same time. Either significantly compromised or failing. Her body was in extreme pain. She was unable to function, and she was effectively bedridden most of the time. When we came here, she had, over the previous year, her body weight had increased quite dramatically because of the system breakdown and because the retention of toxicity in the various tissues and in her body. And so we came here looking for some kind of improvement. My daughter had been ill from 2010, for over 10 years. from the time that she was 10 or 12 years old, and her condition had steadily declined to this point that I just described.
So it started 2000, and 2010 was then when you decided to come here.
Approximately. It really started in the late 90s, 98, 99. We were living in Japan at the time, spending the summers in New York, and then going back to Asia and trying to manage these medical flare-ups that were coming at that time through Japanese doctors, and it was a bad experience because she was heavily treated with antibiotics. She was having physically bad reactions to antibiotics, black rashes over her body, and in spite of that, they kept on continuing with them. Anyway, 2010 happens, and we come here, and with great hope, but reasonable expectations. And the first night after neurotherapy shots, the first meeting with Dr. Rau, he said he was going to try to reboot her system, and he did that by giving her neurotherapy shots in her abdomen and her back. And that first night, she had a wild reaction. I can't even describe. Was one of the best kind of days of my life in the sense that it was the start of a healing process for my daughter. And she, after dinner that evening, went to bed. She started to feel nauseous and threw up. And then she started to expel everything out of her intestines. And then her body started to shake. And she was having some kind of convulsion and starting to sweat dramatically. And it was pretty scary because we had just come over from the United States. We were staying in a hotel near the clinic, and we had only been there for one day. And I called the emergency number that you get for the clinic, and the doctor told me that this reaction was the best thing that we could hope for, that she was responding to the neurotherapy treatment, and that even though this would be a very uncomfortable experience, that we should feel encouraged and happy that this was a reaction. Patients with these reactions tend to be the patients that have the greatest level of success. Anyway, that first night, I changed her clothes 3 times. That's how much water she was expelling from her body. And we changed the sheets on the bed. And between everything that she had experienced that first night, her weight, which was not the main issue, but it was a symptom of the problem, dropped 14 pounds in one evening. More importantly, when we went to breakfast the next day, my daughter told me, after looking like she had been run over by 3 trucks through a very rough evening, told me that it was the first time in 10 years that she was pain-free. So that was obviously an incredibly emotional and important moment for us, and that was the start of a process. Now, pain did come back, and the process wasn't a straight line up, but it was a steady march up with some volatility. And we knew for the first time in over a decade that we were in the right place.
So how is the condition of your daughter now, 3 years later?
So she's perfect. I mean, she has full functionality in her life. She has aches and pains like everybody else. I mean, we all have some things. She went back. She had left school because of her condition. She went back. She completed college. She's currently a teacher in a private school in New York. She has a full-time job. She's extremely happy. She's healthy. She's 100%.
Great. Now, could you tell what you know about that neuropathy shots or treatments?
So, in particular, that treatment what I understand is that they're using small amounts of homeopathic drops on critical points, so acupuncture meridians, to try to stimulate or communicate transmission of information that was either not happening effectively or had stopped happening completely. In effect, kind of rebooting a computer. In her case, with that specific treatment, that's what I understood was what Dr. Rau was doing.
You also mentioned to me yesterday on the walk that the combination with acupuncture was a very strong part of the treatment.
So when we came to the clinic, Christina was on over a dozen conventional medications, including pain management drugs. And Dr. Rau's approach to everything was, I'm going to reduce your pain, get you on a path that's decisively positive, and then at that point, we'll start removing all of the conventional medications that you're on. Because some of those conventional medications have side effects in terms of withdrawal, the clinic used acupuncture to manage the discomfort in the withdrawal from those medications, from the opiates. That was pretty shocking because one of my great concerns was that because the levels were so high, that it would be very difficult for her to get off of those medications without other medications. And it ended up being something that was managed extremely smoothly by the clinic through acupuncture.